My sister stood up at my baby shower right in front of my family and friends and said something that shattered me. She raised her glass, smiled, and said, "Hopefully, this one survives." I heard someone gasp. Plates clattered onto the table. I stood there frozen, fighting the sting of tears, my hands trembling against my belly. I had waited years for this day, dreamed about celebrating the little life growing inside me. And Belle, my own sister, turned it into a nightmare. I looked round the backyard we had decorated with so much love, the pink and gold balloons swaying in the breeze, the guests staring at me with wide eyes. My mom covered her mouth. My best friend mouthed, "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I opened my mouth to say something, anything. But before I could, I felt a familiar hand on my back. It was Caleb, my husband. He had just arrived, and the second he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. He scanned the tense circle of guests, his eyes landing on Belle. Without saying a word, he walked straight to her, pulled her aside, and whispered something that made her face drain of color. Moments later, Belle ran from the party, screaming and crying, and that was just the beginning. The morning of my baby shower, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. The air smelled like fresh rain, and the sun broke through the clouds just enough to paint everything in gold. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my hands over the soft blue dress that stretched over my growing belly. It was a small, intimate gathering, just close family and a few friends, and I had spent weeks obsessing over every detail. I needed this day to be perfect. After 2 painful miscarriages, this pregnancy had felt like a second chance, a fragile miracle. I was finally brave enough to celebrate. I had always pictured my sister Belle standing by my side on days like this. Growing up, we had shared everything, secrets, bedrooms, dreams about the future. Somewhere along the way, though, something shifted. Maybe it was when I got married to Caleb and Belle was still struggling with dead-end relationships. Maybe it was when my career started to take off and hers never really got going. Maybe it was just easier for her to resent me than to admit she felt left behind. I kept telling myself it would get better, that the tension between us was just a phase, that blood would always be thicker than envy. I believed it because I needed to. The backyard was beautiful that afternoon. Caleb and my best friend Tessa had strung pink and gold balloons from the porch to the fence. A long table covered in soft linen and held tiny cupcakes and lemonade in mason jars. The words, "Welcome, Baby Bennett," hung from the archway in glittery script. I walked out into the yard, and the sight of it almost made me cry, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. For a few moments, I forgot about Belle's unpredictable moods, forgot about the ghosts of past pregnancies lost. All I could feel was hope. For the first time in a long time, I truly felt like I could breathe. The guests trickled in, laughing and chatting, arms full of pastel-wrapped presents. I hugged everyone a little tighter than usual. Each embrace felt like a tiny stitch pulling my heart back together. Tessa handed me a cup of lemonade and whispered, "You deserve every bit of this." I smiled and squeezed her hand. She had seen me at my worst, sitting on the cold bathroom floor, staring at yet another negative pregnancy test, and later grieving when the tests turned positive, only to end in heartbreak. Then Belle arrived. She wore a tight white dress, sky-high heels, and a fake smile stretched across her face. She kissed my cheek lightly, the way you might kiss a stranger at a wedding, and handed me a gift bag. Inside was a onesie that read, "Oops, I did it again." I laughed awkwardly, not sure how to take it. Tessa raised an eyebrow, but I shook my head slightly. It was Belle. She made jokes when things got uncomfortable. I told myself not to read too much into it. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself glancing at Belle from across the yard. She wasn't mingling much, just hovering at the edges of conversations, checking her phone, sipping wine. Every time I caught her eye, she would flash me a quick bite smile. I tried to focus on the positive, Everyone else was having a good time. Caleb had ducked out to grab a missing gift from the house, and I figured he would be back any minute. I needed to keep the mood light until then, after the games ended and the cake had been cut. Tessa clinked her glass to call everyone to attention. "A few words for the mom-to-be," she said brightly. I blushed and cradled my stomach, feeling a soft kick against my hand. Guests took turns sharing sweet memories and blessings for our new chapter. Every word felt like a blessing stitched into the fabric of this day. Then my mother, Margot, turned to Belle and said, "Say something, sweetheart." Her voice was light, almost pleading. I stiffened slightly. I could see Belle's mouth pull into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I prayed she would just say something nice, something simple, just this once. Belle lifted her glass. For a second, the whole backyard seemed to hold its breath, and then, with a tone that sounded almost amused, she said it. "Hopefully, this one survives." The words dropped like a bomb, flattening everything around them. In an instant, the warmth and light were sucked out of the air. I felt a tight pressure in my chest, like someone had punched me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was some horrible joke. But the look on her face, the way her lips cooled just slightly, told me otherwise. The guests froze. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Tessa shot me a horrified look. I stood there, too stunned to move, too hurt to even cry. I felt exposed, humiliated, shattered. I was holding everything together with trembling fingers and a fragile smile when I felt Caleb's hand on my back, warm and steady. He was home. He was here. And he had walked in just in time to see everything fall apart. The silence after Belle's words stretched too long. It was the kind of silence that crackles with shock. The kind that makes your skin prickle because everyone knows something terrible just happened, but no one is brave enough to break it. I stood there, heart pounding against my ribs, willing myself not to cry. Not here, not now, not in front of everyone. I looked around, searching for something, anything to anchor me. Tessa's hand covered her mouth, her eyes shining with disbelief. My mother stared hard at the tablecloth, pretending not to have heard what everyone had heard. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. The balloons tied to the arch bobbed in the breeze, bright and cheerful, mocking the heavy, ugly air that now settled over the party. Belle took a sip of her wine like nothing had happened. She laughed lightly like she had just made a harmless joke, like she had not just ripped open every wound I had spent years trying to heal. I swallowed hard and pressed my palm against my stomach as if I could shield my baby from the venom that had just been poured over us. My first instinct was to run, to hide. I wanted to escape the yard, the eyes, the pity already starting to bloom on faces around me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. If I ran, she would win. If I crumbled, she would know she had gotten what she wanted. My baby deserved better than that. I deserved better. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to cut through the tension. But no words came. All I could think about were the nights I had spent cold on the bathroom floor, the hospital visits, the cruel finality of doctors shaking their heads. All of it crashed into me in that moment, all the grief I had fought so hard to keep buried. Then I felt Caleb's hand on my back, steady and warm, grounding me. He had arrived just in time to catch the last thread of Belle's cruelty hanging in the air. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His body stiffened beside me, his hand sliding from my back to my shoulder in a silent promise. I looked up at him, my vision blurry with unchecked tears. He gave me one look, a look full of anger and love and something else. Something I couldn't name, but trusted completely. Tessa stepped forward, trying to salvage the moment. She raised her glass and said a little too brightly to R and Caleb and their beautiful future. A few guests murmured agreement, glasses clinking half-heartedly. But the damage was done. The mood had curdled, and no amount of forced smiles could stitch it back together. Caleb leaned down and whispered, I'll be right back. His voice was low, even, but there was steel in it. I watched as he walked across the yard, calm but purposeful. Guests parted for him without thinking. He headed straight for Belle, who was laughing at something my cousin had said, as if she hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. When Caleb reached her, he didn't shout. He didn't cause a scene. He simply touched her elbow and said something I couldn't hear. Belle stiffened, her glass hovering halfway to her mouth. Caleb leaned in closer, speaking directly into her ear. Whatever he said made Belle's face go pale. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She set her glass down with a sharp clink and turned on her heel. She stormed across the yard, heels stabbing into the grass, hair whipping round her face. As she passed me, she shot me a look that was pure fury. It was not the look of someone ashamed. It was the look of someone who had just been exposed and hated it. She shoved past the guests, knocking over a chair, and disappeared through the gate, slamming it so hard behind her that the sound echoed like a gunshot. The backyard was silent again. But this time it was different. The tension had broken, leaving behind something like relief. Guests shifted awkwardly, some murmuring small apologies, others pretending to fuss with their phones or the food table. My mother stood rooted to her spot, her face carefully blank. Caleb returned to me, his face softening as he reached me. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight enough to press all the broken pieces of me back together. I sagged against him, the weight of the moment crushing down on me. "You're okay?" he murmured into my hair. "I've got you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, because for the first time in my life, standing there in the ruins of what was supposed to be a celebration, I realized something hard and necessary. Sometimes family is not the people you're born to, but the people who fight for you when it matters. And Caleb, without a doubt, was my family. After Belle stormed out, a strange kind of hush settled over the backyard. It was not the heavy, oppressive silence from before. It was lighter, almost clean, as if her exit had lifted something toxic from the air. I stayed in Caleb's arms for a long moment, breathing in the steady rise and fall of his chest, letting his warmth remind me that I was not alone. I had lost so much before, but this time, I was not standing in the ruins by myself. Finally, I pulled back and looked up at him. His face was calm, but I could still see the anger flickering behind his eyes, not the explosive kind, the protective, measured kind that told me he had made a choice the second he saw me broken and fighting not to fall apart. "We need to talk," I whispered, my throat still raw from holding back tears. Caleb nodded and led me toward the house, away from the murmuring guests and the wreckage of what was supposed to be a joyful afternoon. As we walked, I caught glimpses of faces, some filled with pity, some with awkwardness, a few with quiet approval. I kept my eyes forward. Right now, there was only one person whose opinion mattered to me. We stepped into the kitchen, the familiar smell of vanilla candles and fresh flowers wrapping around us. Caleb closed the door softly behind us. I leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling the weight of everything crash onto my shoulders. My knees wobbled, but Caleb was there, steady and strong. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm sorry. She ruined today." He crossed the room into strides and cubed my face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away the tears I did not even realize had started falling. "Ella," he said firmly, "you have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing." I closed my eyes, letting the truth of his words sink in. For years, I had apologized for Belle's behavior. I had made excuses, smoothed things over, begged others to understand her pain while swallowing my own. It was always easier to bend than to confront, easier to patch the cracks than to tear down the whole wall and start over. But standing there, in the wreckage of yet another moment she had poisoned, I realized I could not keep doing it. Not for Belle, not for my mother, not for anyone. "I can't keep letting her do this," I said. The words came out shaky, but stronger than I felt. I can't keep letting her tear me apart piece by piece and pretending it's love. Caleb nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. You don't have to, he said. Not anymore. I slid down onto one of the kitchen stools, my hand resting instinctively on my belly. My baby kicked softly as if reminding me that I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for both of us, for the kind of life I wanted my child to know. A life where love was not something you had to earn or apologize for. A life where family meant safety, not fear. I think I need to take a break from her, I said, the decision forming as I spoke it aloud. I need space, real space, no visits, no texts, no pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Caleb pulled out the stool beside me and took my hand in his. I'll support whatever you decide, he said, but you need to do this for you, not for anyone else. I nodded. For me, for the baby. The door creaked open slightly, and Tessa peeked her head in. Her eyes were gentle, full of the kind of understanding only a true friend could offer. Everything okay? She asked softly. I smiled. A real smile this time. Small, but real it will be, I said. Tessa stepped fully into the room and handed me a plate with a slice of cake, the frosting slightly smudged, but still beautiful. I figured you might need this. I laughed. The sound surprising even me. It felt good, like a window cracking open after a long, dark winter. We're going to finish this day, Caleb said. We're going to celebrate you and this baby, and nobody gets to take that from us. I looked at the two of them, Caleb, my husband, my rock, and Tessa, my oldest friend, my anchor. And I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Safe, loved. Enough. I took the plate from Tessa and picked up the fork. My hand was steady now. The decision had been made, and with it came a strength I had almost forgotten I possessed. I was done letting other people's bitterness read my story. From now on, I was writing it myself, and it was going to be beautiful. I stepped back out into the backyard with Caleb and Tessa at my side. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in soft gold, as if trying to erase the shadows Belle had left behind. Some of the guests had drifted toward the dessert table, nervously nibbling cupcakes, pretending that everything was fine. Others stood in small, uncertain clusters, glancing at me with quiet concern. For a moment, I hesitated. I thought about ending the party early, making an excuse, and sending everyone home. But then I thought about what Caleb had said inside, and more importantly, about the life growing inside me. I had spent too long letting shame and grief dictate the terms of my happiness. Not today, not anymore. I lifted my chin, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked toward the center of the yard. Tessa moved to the speaker and quietly turned the music back on. A soft, hopeful melody filled the air. I turned to the guests, who slowly grew quiet, sensing that something was about to happen. Thank you all for being here, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Today was about celebrating new beginnings, about hope, about family. And that hasn't changed. I saw a few people nod, a few others exhale, the tension beginning to melt away. I continued. Sometimes family means the people who show up when it matters, the people who lift you up instead of tear you down. Today, I am surrounded by family. At that moment, Caleb stepped beside me, slipping his hand into mine, and the gesture said everything words could not. I squeezed his hand back, feeling a surge of love so fierce it made my heart ache. We're so excited to welcome our little miracle into a world full of love, I finished. And I'm grateful for each and every one of you who chooses to be part of. That applause broke out, small at first, then stronger, genuine. Smiles returned. Guests raised their glasses, this time with real warmth. I felt the energy shift like a current finally flowing in the right direction. As I moved among the guests, I caught snippets of whispered conversations. I can't believe her sister would say something like that. One woman murmured, "I handled it with such grace." Another whispered. I let their words wash over me without clinging to them. I had not done this for their approval. I had done it for myself, for my baby, for the life I was building from the ashes of everything Belle had tried to burn down later. After the last gift had been opened and the last cupcake eaten, Caleb and I stood together under the fading light, watching the final few guests trickle out through the gate. My mother approached us, her face tight, and certain error, she began wringing her hands. Belle didn't mean I held up my hand, calm but firm. "Mom, please, not today." She opened her mouth as if to argue. Then thought better of it. She nodded stiffly, kissed my cheek, and walked away, her shoulders sagging as she disappeared down the driveway. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep, steady certainty that I had done the right thing. Caleb turned to me, brushing a stray hair from my face. "Proud of you," he said simply. Tears filled my eyes again. But this time they were not from pain. They were from pride, relief, hope. We went inside, the quiet house, welcoming us with open arms. Caleb helped me out of my shoes and led me to the couch. We curled up together, my head on his chest, his hand resting protectively over my belly. I listened to the slow, steady beat of his heart, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally claimed the right to protect my own happiness, to protect my family. Somewhere inside me, a tiny flutter kicked against Caleb's hand. He laughed softly, a deep, joyful sound that filled the room. "She's strong," he said. I smiled, resting my hand over his. "She's going to have to be." That night, I drifted to sleep, feeling something I thought I had lost forever, hope steady and fierce, blooming where bitterness had once lived. Belle's words had tried to crush me, but they had only revealed something stronger. I was not the broken one. I was not the weak one. I was the one who survived. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. The memories of the baby shower were still fresh, but they no longer crushed me. I had expected to feel broken, maybe even ashamed. Instead, I felt stronger, as if something inside me had been reforged in the fire Belle tried to start. I made a quiet breakfast while Caleb slept in. The house was peaceful, the kitchen bathed in soft morning light. I sipped my tea and ran my hand over my belly, feeling a tiny nudge in return. I thought about everything that had led me to this moment, the years of trying, the heartbreak of losses, the nights of wondering if I was enough, if my body was strong enough, if my spirit could keep going. I thought about Belle, about the years I had spent trying to win her approval, to smooth over her sharp edges, to protect her at my own expense. I had clung to the idea that family loyalty meant enduring cruelty without complaint, that love meant sacrifice, no matter the cost. But standing there at my own baby shower, humiliated and heartbroken, I had seen the truth with blinding clarity. Love does not humiliate. Love does not tear down or diminish. Real love builds, heals, strengthens, and sometimes real love looks like choosing yourself when others will not. Caleb joined me at the table, still rumpled from sleep, his eyes soft. When he looked at me, he did not ask about Belle. He did not ask if I wanted to reach out or smooth things over. He trusted me to make my own choice. That trust, that quiet support, meant more than 1,000 empty apologies ever could. Later that week, I received a few texts from family members. Some were supportive, telling me they admired how I handled myself. Others were more cautious, trying to excuse Belle's behavior or urging me to be the bigger person. I read each message carefully, but I did not reply. I owed no one an explanation for protecting my peace. The truth was the decision I made in the kitchen that day had already taken root. I was done sacrificing my happiness to preserve relationships that hurt more than they healed. I was not closing the door on my family forever. I was simply stepping away long enough to heal, to build something better for myself and for the little girl growing inside me. In the weeks that followed, life moved forward. Caleb and I finished decorating the nursery. We painted the walls a soft sage green and hung tiny animal prints above the crib. We spent late nights building furniture, laughing when we realized we had installed half the drawers backward. Tessa came over often, bringing freezer meals and staying late to talk about everything and nothing. There were moments when sadness crept in, moments when I missed the idea of the sister I had always wanted Belle to be. But those moments passed, and what remained was a deep, solid sense of peace. I started to realize that survival was not just about getting through the hard moments. It was about choosing to live differently after them. It was about creating a life built on joy, not just endurance. The baby shower became a story people whispered about, then moved on from. But for me, it was a line in the sand, a moment when I stopped asking permission to be happy, a moment when I finally chose myself, my baby, my future, over the wreckage of the past. Months later, when I finally held my daughter in my arms, tiny and perfect and fierce, I thought about all the battles we had already fought together. I kissed her soft forehead and promised her that I would always fight for her and for myself with the same fire. I promised that she would grow up knowing what real love looked like, that she would never have to question her worth, that she would know she came from a line of women who survived, who built beauty from brokenness, who chose hope when it would have been easier to give up. That promise was the real gift of that day, not the balloons or the cake or the decorations. It was the gift I gave myself when I finally said enough. I was not just surviving anymore. I was living, and I was doing it on my own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. It was not easy to share, but I know there are so many people out there who have been hurt by someone they thought they could trust. If my experience showed me anything, it is that we are stronger than the people who try to break us. We are allowed to protect our peace. We are allowed to choose better for ourselves and the ones we love. If this story touched you, or if you have ever had to walk away from someone you cared about to find your own happiness, please take a second to like this video. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that they are not alone. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, your stories, your strength, your victories. I read every single one, and if you want to hear more real, raw, and honest stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are building a community here where healing and hope are always welcome. Thank you again for being here.